Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Homeland Security Today interviews with some of the experts leading our charges against the most pressing Homeland Security challenges. As many of you know, cyber is a big word that covers a lot of different things. And today we're excited to welcome Ron Zayas of Ironwall by Incogni to discuss the importance of data privacy. And it's a little different take on data privacy because of some of the, tactics and tools that activists and others are using personal data information for. And that in particular is doxing and also just releasing personally identified information, PII, to people to pretty much terrorize them and make them afraid to do what they need to do. This topic came up because Homeland Security Today covered the flyers that have been put up around LA neighborhoods and also Southern California, releasing the personal information and pictures of ICE agents. So this is not exactly doxing, which is a cyber phenomena where people release personal PII on the internet, but it's physical flyers that were put up to have folks not only recognize, but be able to go to these people's homes and do what they would do. So with that, I'm very excited to welcome Ron to this conversation because he has a long history in looking at privacy and the importance of privacy laws and rules. And so welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So it's kind of alarmingly easy to find the PII on people these days. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, we've seen extremists just release home addresses, phone numbers, family details. We've seen people terrorize government officials in their homes. We even had the experience where our previous managing editor, her name and address was released by extremists here in Virginia. So it's happening more and more to people functioning in their jobs.
And I would use the word terrifying, I think, more than alarming. And not to make light of the situation, but really we have three things that have just come together. Number one is, I think, a belief in society that everything is personal, that it isn't about laws, it isn't about the rule of law, it isn't about a process, it isn't about the respect that we have for each other. It's really, if you do something, it's a personal grievance against me. And that's an important shift because I'll say this. One of the things that we do is when somebody's threatened, we've been trained by experts in the government to find out and try to filter, what's kind of a non-threat, and counterintuitively, if somebody says, I want to kill you, that's not the highest level threat there. If somebody says, you're going to pay for what you did to me, that's a really high level threat. That's personal, and it means that I see you as being the reason for my grievance. So number one, we've got a society that somewhere along the line has just jumped to everything being a personal affront. That if you cut in front of me in traffic, or you cut in front of me at the supermarket line, or you don't rule the way in court I want you to rule, or you say something about my friend, that it's a personal grievance. So that's number one. That's been a change over these last few years. The second thing is that the amount of information that is out there is so copious and so exaggerated. I don't think most people understand that if you go to a data broker, somebody whose job it is to collect information, to compile it, and then to sell it, that there could be 2,000 pieces of information on you. Everything from your name, your address, your family, your credit card, your health, your health history, your passwords. There could be all sorts of information. And this is a $500 billion business. So collecting that information and selling it is just incredible as how much information is out there. So if you combine number one with number two, what you get is doxing. You get people who say, I don't want to go through and Kristina, just complain to your show or do another podcast that competes with yours. I want to terrify you. I want to go after you. And I'm not going to do that at work. One, I may not know where you work. It may be a virtual workplace, or you may be surrounded by people, or if you're a government official, you may be protected by, law enforcement while you're in your building. But if I can get to your home, if I can make you feel vulnerable, that's going to change what you do. It's going to make you self-censure. And that's what's happening. I think that's what you're seeing with home security officers. You're seeing it with Border Patrol. You're seeing it with judges. You're seeing it with law enforcement and with elected officials and with everyday people. That if somebody can say, I know who you are and I know where you live, and here's your spouse and here are your children, you feel so vulnerable, you're going to change the way you're doing it. That's what doxing is about. It's not about sharing information. It's about terrifying somebody to get your needs and to get your means.
Absolutely. And that's being used more and more. I mean, we've just had a CEO shot on the street. So it is not just a silly little thing. It is very legitimate. And as you said, when people do that very personal belief that this was against me, whether you agree with the practice or not, I think it also stems from people believing that certain policies are responsible, and the people that espouse those policies are responsible for individual things. So the saying used to be that you make some of the people happy some of the time, and then some people are unhappy, and if you have both, that you've kind of hit a middle ground. But now unhappy people are taking it to a different level. So HS Today has been kind of covering this from the doxing perspective, just because it is a form of personal terrorism. It's what the cartels use. It's what, it used to be that the bad people use these techniques to shut police up and anyone going against them. But now it's become much more widespread. So that is terrifying. And I guess the result is that you would scrub everything about yourself off the internet, and that everything would go undercover. And frankly, from a democracy's point of view, we used to be like, you could just walk into your representative's office and say hello. And now all of that is shutting down as a response to this kind of thing. So can you speak a little bit to the response? And
Yes, and I'll start by saying nobody is more paranoid about their information being out than me. I don't have social media accounts because about that. But in reality, what we've found is you want to live in a digital world. Most people want the ability to have communications, to have connections. And the balance is to find what's the information that you're comfortable releasing and what you're not. And for me, what really draws that line is that your home address and your home mobile number or your personal mobile number are probably the two pieces you want to protect the most for a couple of reasons. Number one, nobody wants somebody coming to their home. I mean, whether you're a police officer, whether you're an executive, whether you're, Homeland Security or whatever you are, a judge, when you go home, you should have the right to turn off. You can't be on alert 24 hours a day. So number one, our homes are sacrosanct. It's where privacy has always been the utmost. The conception or the idea of privacy starts in your home. So number one, not letting people know where you live is extremely important. The reason we protect mobile numbers and why people should protect them more than they do, almost like a social security number, is because if I know your mobile number, I can ping your carrier and find out where you live. I can find out, who's on your plan, which is usually your family. I can even, because your phone is probably turned on right now, Kristina, and is with you, it knows everywhere you go. Yeah. So I mean, if when I buy, and I can buy GPS coordinates, I can find out if you stop at Starbucks every day, or if you go to a school to drop off children, or whatever the case may be. So those two pieces of information, I think awareness, number one, you need to protect those like you would a social security number. I'm always amazed. I'll be in a supermarket, and again, my wife will not go to supermarkets with me anymore because she hates these kind of episodes. But they'll say to somebody, are you part of our loyalty program? The person will say, oh, I don't have my card. Oh, give me your mobile number. And they'll start to blurt out in front of a dozen other people what their mobile number is. And I'll say, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you say it again? Because I'd like to write that down. And they give you this look and then you say, here's the point. If I have that number, I know where you live. Are you comfortable with that? And at that point, people start saying, No. And that's number one, the awareness we want to do. Number two, understand that the idea is not to erase you from the internet. That ain't going to happen. But neither do we have to give in to be willing victims. So I think where you start putting the fight out is protecting your home address, protecting your mobile number. And if you do that, you can put yourself in a position to protect yourself. If you are law enforcement, if you are a jurist, if you are, somebody in the government or in the public eye, you probably need to do a little bit more than that and be a little bit more aggressive about protecting that information. And more importantly, removing the information that's out there, because you never know when you're going to be on the attack. Somebody's going to attack you.
Well, I think that the word privacy means very, very different things depending on what generation you're sitting in. Because I have watched privacy, in my opinion, mean nothing these days. And yet, if DHS tries to read a public license plate, everyone gets all up in arms. And I'm like, well, really? That's what you're concerned about? So it's a real struggle to understand what the real conception of what should be private. Because what was private, like, I think we're kind of in the same generation. What was private with us coming up was so different than today because of the digital world, but also because of people's willingness to give up all that information to kind of everybody. So there are tons of retailers, there are tons of everybody who has that information. And interestingly, when the nation went through the TikTok debate, trying to convince young people TikTok wasn't a great idea, they were like, China's got all my data anyway. So when you have that kind of laissez-faire attitude towards who has your information, assuming it wouldn't be used for something like an attack, tell us more about the dangers of having that kind of lax attitude.
Well, and very much. And by the way, let's just start with what you were saying about a license plate. In the past, if you had a license plate or you had a license plate scanner, what it could be law enforcement or it could be tow trucks. What they were looking for was, are your plates expired or not? And there's some logic there. Again, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with a tow truck company having that information, but I get that. The problem is that with data brokers, especially, and how much information is being collected, now you can look at somebody's license plate, hit it against the database, know who they are, know what their position is, and be able to put a lot of information together. And on top of that, the people who you can get that information from turn to you and say, well, where were you when you got, now that I know it's Kristina's license plate and I have all this information on her, which I'm willing to sell to you, you sell me something. Where were you? It's different if Kristina were parked in a Target parking lot versus being parked at a cancer health clinic. There's a whole different.
Thanks for not putting me at some city motel.
No, yeah, I thought about that, and I thought, no, let's put it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, think about that. Just that position, when you tie it to all the information, tells a lot. So what should people be doing, and how should they be protected? Number one, you wouldn't give out your social security number. You wouldn't give out a credit card number, to anybody. We're kind of trained to not do that. But think about this. If my credit card number gets, stolen by somebody, what is my ultimate, what's the damage that can be done there? In most cases, none. I have to get a new card. In the worst case, I may pay $50. All things considered, that's pretty minor. What can be done with your home address? What can be done with, being able to know where you are? And for most people, they're thinking, hey, I'm nobody. I'm just doing data. But what's happening today is that you could be nobody until you cut somebody off in traffic. You could be nobody until you exercise your First Amendment right to protest. You could be nobody until you do lots of things that are normal, and then all of a sudden somebody says, I have a grievance against you. Think about a peaceful protest. That's the cornerstone of the First Amendment. Somebody then goes by, looks at the news, takes the picture of somebody on there, uses face recognition, does a reverse search on Google, and turns out that it's, John Smith. And then I say, all right, where does John Smith live? And I can go to a People Finder site, find out where he lives, finds out where his family, and then I put up on a Facebook post John Smith was protesting something that I didn't believe in, which makes him a bad American or makes him a bad person. And that way, and he lives at 123 Street with his wife and his 3 kids. Think about the implications about people who are taking everything so personally that it's an attack. So, what do? Number one is obviously you're very careful to give that information out. Again, I tell people where you live and what your phone number is should be protected like your social security number. If you wouldn't give your social security number out to a stranger, do not give out your address, do not give out your phone. Second of all, take back control. Most states, I don't know that most is correct, but around 22 states have protections, California being a leading one on that, to be able to get your information back. And if you are a judge, if you're a political, elected official, if you're a police officer, if you're a federal officer, a lot more states have protections, and there are some federal statutes to be able to protect you. You can find that information and start pulling it back. And then do things that are common sense, that are easy to do. Get a VPN, a virtual private network that encrypts what you do. Why is that important? Because your ISP, whether it's your phone or your home, has the right to snoop on everything that you do and sell that information. And it is personally identifiable. Whenever possible, do not give out your phone number. There are lots of services that will sell you a fake number that forward to you that doesn't have GPS information, that doesn't have your home information on it. Use that. Whenever possible, be inconsistent. Don't always use the same email. Definitely don't use the same password. And when somebody asks you for information, ask them, why do you need that? I mean, I understand that Amazon needs to deliver to my home. I get that. Do I need to give Amazon my phone number? No. What's the advantage in me to give somebody another piece of information on me? Do I need to tell the pizza place what my phone number is? Really, no. You're either going to deliver the pizza or you're not. Why do they ask you? Because they sell that information, the data brokers. So it doesn't have to be that you have to be paranoid. You just have to understand that people are using your information for money. And once things become monetized, they spiral out of control. And anything that can be used to be sold can be used against you. So there's just some really basic steps you can take to help protect you to be a less willing victim. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you want to do.
Absolutely. And you are seeing a push too with a lot of the stores, everyone trying to get the phone number and giving free shipping or giving this, whatever. And you're absolutely right. You don't need text by text of where your package is at every minute of its day. You probably don't care. You just want to know it's on its way. You can get an email for that. So tell us a little bit about really walking that back, because as I think about, all of us who grew up in this digital age and slowly but surely shared more and more information, because, you can go online and find me. It's pretty darn easy. How do you walk that back, but still have a professional profile and existence on the internet, or should you?
Well, and I think you should. And again, there's a difference between people being able to find you, Kristina, and find what you're doing professionally, find what you're marketing yourself. That's fine. I just don't need to know where you live. There is really no good reason for anybody who doesn't know you to be able to find where you live. None. Nobody should know who your relatives are. I mean, that's just not, unless you decide to share that information. I shouldn't know if you have children or not, or who your spouse is, or who your parents are. I shouldn't have to know any of that. And then the third thing is, the reason everybody wants your phone number is because you've probably changed your home address more often than you've changed your mobile number. I mean, if you think about that, your email changes all the time. Your address can change, your car can change, but I've had my same phone number for decades. So that's why it's so valuable. Anything I can tie to you that's very personal can get to you. But look at the other side of that too, by the way. If you are elderly, people over 65 are attacked for online scams constantly. So how do they know, number one, that you're over 65? They're buying that information from from the data brokers. Then they have your phone number, and a phone is so immediate and so visceral that when we get a text, we're conditioned to respond to it. Different from an email, different from a letter, snail mail. You get time to think about this. I have elderly parents, and they know what I do for a living. The only way I can protect them is for people never to get them the scam. Because if they think they're getting a call from one of their great grandchildren that's in help, no matter what I told them, they are going to respond. So roll back. The first thing is to understand how much information you have out there. You can go to different websites, and I can give some specific ones where you can type in your name and it'll tell you how much information is out there. So that's number one. Get an idea, because I think it will frighten you. Number two, you have the right in most states to remove that information. You could do it yourself. There are white papers out there that will walk you through how to be able to do that. Our company provides that. But on top of that, you can also hire a company to do it for you all the time. The last thing I would say is everybody should be willing that, because you never know when you're going to be on the hot seat. But if you are law enforcement, if you are a judge, if you are in the federal government, if you are in any of these, understand that it's not just protecting yourself, it's protecting your family. Because if somebody wants to come after you, they're not going to come after you one-on-one when you're in full, armed gear and you're surrounded by others and are protected. They're not going to do that. They're going to attack your family. They're going to come after, you when you're not suspecting this, when you're calm, when you're worrying about, your family stuff rather than anything else. So you need to take it before something happens. It's too late to pull that information. Be proactive now, whether you use a service or do it yourself. Do that and be aware of not giving out that information.
That's excellent advice. And I was actually going to ask exactly that. Like, what do you recommend for government employees and others working in our system, regardless, really in the private sector as well, how they protect themselves? But let me, since you kind of answered that, let me ask you this as our final question. What would you say to a young person who really, just doesn't think this is a thing, to kind of do your best shot at convincing them that they need to be more careful?
I would say two things. Number one, understand that today information is the currency. There's the old joke that if you're at a poker game and you don't know who the sucker is, it's you. If you're working with a company and you don't know how they make money, it's because they're making money off of your information. So understand that, number one, that almost every company out there is trying to collect your information to sell it, because they get more from selling it than they probably do selling the product. So number one, understand that you don't owe anybody a right to give them, you don't owe them a need to give them your real information or anything else. You should decide what's personal to you. And if you think that that's not a big deal or it's too hard, just think about this. And I don't want to sound sexist, but more than 54% of our clients are female. There are more than 30 million domestic violence victims in the U.S. There have been judges that have been killed at home because of their information out there. They've had family members killed. There have been law enforcement people killed. There have been all sorts of people attacked. This is not a joke. So think about this. Would you leave your door open? At home, would you leave it open for anybody to come in? Would you drive without a seatbelt? Would you let your child not be in a child seat? If you would answer no to all of those, then understand that information is how people are going to come to you. Look at it as being more than just something that's free and everybody has. Think to yourself, I'm leaving the door open. I'm leaving my child unprotected. And if you say you don't care about any of those things, you're probably not going to care about information either. But if those things are important in protecting yourself and others, is understand that the way people are going to come to you is through your home and through your personal information. Those are the attacks of the 21st century. And that's what you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I have a personal saying, it doesn't matter till it matters. And we all kind of go through and, oh, it doesn't matter. I did this and there was no consequence, and there's no consequence. And then one day the consequence is huge. So I guess your advice is there to help people not suffer that ultimate consequence of having their attack or their personal property or themselves damaged. So that's great advice. Thank you for coming and joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and thank you to all of our readers and listeners for following the Homeland Security Today interviews. We always try and touch base with someone who's a true expert, who's worked in the field, and who can provide some constructive information for you to be safer and for our nation to be safer. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking with Ron again in the future. Is that okay with you, Ron?
I appreciate that. I would love that. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much.